Greetings. My name is Mike Pascarella, president of Pascarella Multimedia and the founder of Thinking Out Loud, a think tank symposium for entrepreneurs. This is the first in a series of short videos featuring interviews with great minds, sharing thoughtful perspectives on the worlds of art, business, and the social fabric of this changing world. My guest today is Jordan Rich. Jordan is a well-known and well-loved personality, not only in the Boston area, but nearly everywhere. As the host of WBZ Radio's Jordan Rich Show, he graced our radios for decades. He's a skilled voiceover artist, instructor, producer, MC, public speaker, and marketing expert. His popular Connoisseur's Corner and On Mic with Jordan Rich continues his rich legacy in broadcasting. Jordan is also co-owner of Chart Productions, along with Ken Carberry. Welcome, Jordan.
Mike, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being so nice to invite me.
It is my pleasure to have you here. Well, Jordan, these are changing times. COVID-19, social reforms, lots of political unrest. Through it all, you've had the need really to keep your finger on the pulse of America. What's changed for you?
Well, besides the logistics that's changed for everybody, not a lot's changed for me, actually. The one thing I can say, Mike, is that I'm focusing on the work, and I'll explain it happily if you'd like, on the work and redirecting the work to serve more of the public's need and interest. It's very easy to be entertaining and to be audacious and loud and boisterous during any period. But I've got the kind of job that enables me to talk to people, as you're talking to me, bring out the best in them, and in the case of COVID-19 and what's going on, alert others in the community to what these fine folks are doing. So I'm basically just a messenger boy, but that's always been my role and my most treasured role. I want to bring not just important information, but positive, enthusiastic, inspiring stories to people when they need it most. I know I need it most. So that's my in general, very vague, overreaching generalization, but I'm working as hard as ever, loving the work and dedicating myself as much as possible to public service, in terms of broadcast.
Well, you mentioned being a messenger, and I know the message lately has been a combination of good and bad. We're seeing people come together. We're seeing the heroes in our community, people in the medical field. We're seeing businesses start to be creative with their trajectory. But sometimes the message is not good news. Sometimes it's tough. And my opinion is that you've always been able to take sometimes what is a tough message to hear and maybe offer a more positive perspective, or somehow deliver it in a way that isn't creating additional anxiety or elicit negative responses.
The temptation, and having done it for 40 years, the temptation to take advantage of any situation for your own edification, your ratings, for popularity, call it what you will, is always there. And I'm a human being, so I've felt it over the years. The restraint has enabled me and people in my sphere to do what we do consistently and not either rock the boat too much and lose our gigs or not be ostracized. But at the same time, you've got to be practical and clear. Now, I'm not doing a live talk show these days. I retired from that officially about 3 or 4 years ago. But as a podcaster and as a features guy, what's different now than even 5 years ago is the level of sensitivity to almost anything you say, anything you've said in the past. So we're living in a very odd era. They used to quote George Orwell saying, Big Brother was going to get us, and Big Brother would be the government. Well, Big Brother is not really the government. It's sort of all of our neighbors who have cell phones and access to social media. So a lot has changed even in the last 4 or 5 years, and you being a very technically knowledgeable guy know more than this than anybody. But I think from my perspective, there is a lot of unrest, but it's also magnified tenfold in the social media and media circle. And I actually see kind of what you're seeing on the business end. I'm seeing it in community, talking to all these wonderful people, whether it be COVID related or fostering better relations between races, just positive people, practical people who are not getting the press. I see more of that. So I'm always a glass half full kind of guy, as you know, and I can tell you that my biggest regret right now is that we're in a media cycle, and forget about right or left. We're just in this media cycle, this parade of gotcha journalism or beating a story to death or not focusing on facts and statistics, but focusing on emotion. So we're in a tough time for consumers of media. And that's why in my little tiny sphere, I'm thrilled that I do what I do and stay away from all of that for the most part.
So there's the emotional content, the emotional part of content at this point. Um, it's interesting because I'm seeing lots of changes with respect to target audiences. Their concerns are different than they were just a few months ago. Their focus a little bit different. How does that change your approach? I mean, you're a content guy. I'm a content guy. We have to really be concerned about that target audience and what's driving them and what's triggering them, either in positive ways or negative ways.
Yeah, you just said something though that I'd like to comment on, and that is how things are changing so quickly, and even in the last 4 months, when strangely enough, everything has slowed down in our lives. We don't drive anywhere, we don't go places, we don't fly as much, we don't party as much. And yet, as much as the physical nature of our lives has slowed down, it seems as though the mental activity has just increased, and that's leading to a lot of stress, but also the connectivity. What we're doing right here, by the way, is really awesome, but it's also overwhelming. So you finish your question, but I just dawned on me, my God, people say everything has stopped, but I think everything is revved up while we're stopped. Interesting. Go ahead. You were.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing in some ways. I hear from a lot of people that they are overwhelmed by the number of video conferencing meetings that they have, several per day. Um, One of the things that I've been talking about to my constituents out there in the business world is we really don't want to wait it out. We've got to keep. I have a friend of mine who talks about keeping the light on. We have to maintain um, some momentum, even though it might be a little bit different from what we were doing before. We have to, there's got to be forward trajectory. We have to be doing something. And the way that that we're doing it now feels very, very different. And I think what's happening is we're changing expectations, we're changing habits. I think it's going to be a slower transition from where we were, I'm sorry, where we are now to maybe where we will be once we are post COVID-19. So what I do and how I present it um, needs to reflect that. Are you seeing a similar sort of thing? I mean, can you communicate in the same way that you did months ago at this point, or do you have a different set of criteria and concerns?
I will say this, that, and I'm not a champion yet. I haven't figured it all out yet, but I think we're actually returning in a weird way to the simple, more direct, more connectable kind of communication. Let's be practical about this. I have found that I pick up the phone and actually talk to someone now, a client, a prospective client, I offer to meet. The ability to meet online is so easy because you don't have to drive anywhere. But I'm finding that communication is more critical now than ever. So returning emails even more quickly, um, being prompt with updating your social media calendars, but also just using the telephone, the old-fashioned blower, as Archie Bunker used to call it, the old-fashioned, and the one-on-one is what's missing. We don't shake hands, we don't hug, we don't see people in the flesh because of what's going on. So we have to use all the other means necessary. And I'm finding, and Mike, I'm talking to you and everybody else out there who's got a small business. We've all lost business. Everyone, I don't care who you are, unless you're manufacturing hand sanitizer by the bucketful, you are not, you're hurting. But
Yeah.
but the people who have stuck with me and the new clients we've picked up, albeit a lot smaller in terms of income and revenue, we're finding the best way to keep these clients is to do what we've always done times 10: personal service, personal connection. No one's treated with any less deference. Everyone is basically treated as the biggest client we have, because these are desperate times. So I would say that what's changed is there's probably more communication, for me anyway, with phone and email than I had previously. And I like that, and people like that. I mean, first of all, I get to use my voice, which is kind of fun. And second of all, I can be more of myself. Um, and I'm a one brick at a time kind of guy. I used to joke on the radio that I had a campaign to raise my ratings one listener at a time. You know, if that meant just making one person happy, I would do that. But I feel the same way. It's building, we have to build back our lives and our businesses after this shock to the system. So I do it one brick at a time, and I do it with personal connection. And I'm talking, sending, there's a wonderful friend of mine, a female who's been in the business for a long time. She's getting over some serious health issues. So I ordered up a book that I love to send to certain people on Amazon, and I just put it in the mail. Actually put things in the mail. That's how unusual these times are. So that's about it. It's not a big fancy schmancy marketing plan for success. It's just people to people.
Interesting. I like the comment about picking up the phone and talking to people. There's an immediacy there. There's an interactivity that struggles in other texts. And sometimes I think with texts, we do it too quickly. There's that interactivity and that response is too quick. We don't maybe think enough. And with emails, it tends to be a little bit slower. And maybe not as immediate. So that person-to-person connection, that looking at a target audience for making them somehow feel that they are special. It's a very interesting point. You said one listener at a time. Who wants to feel like they're being marketed to en masse, right? People don't like to be marketed to, period. But to be able to have that sense of, there you are, Jordan Rich, you're on the radio or on the internet doing all the things that you do, and you're connecting with somebody. Somebody feels that they're connecting with you on a personal level. How great is that? And in your case, if you're able to do that simultaneously, you say one listener at a time, but if you have 1,000 people who are logged in to one of your podcasts, that one at a time is happening simultaneously times the 1,000.
Well, I think the greatest individual development in communications is, in the last 20 years, is the concept of algorithms and algorithm building. And what I really appreciate now, Mike, and you do too, is the fact that what I do in one medium, let's say radio or podcast, is then spread exponentially through the internet, through various means, through various downloads, links, etc., like a virus, and I hate to use that term these days, but a viral spread that is almost inevitable and is going to lead to success. And it gets back to your question about marketing. Who's the audience, targeting people? We just had this discussion yesterday with a new potential client about how to market their association, their trade association, and it's no longer buying placards on the MBTA, although that's always been the case, or putting an ad in the local paper. These are mediums you have to look at with a little more care. But it's, where are people open? What are they opening up? They're opening up their Facebook pages. They're opening up, Google. They're doing all these things, and they're downloading podcasts. So where do you reach them? How do you reach them? And it's, as long as you treat the listener or the consumer with an element of respect. By that I mean, you don't dumb it down to the point where they don't get it, or they think that you're insulting them. You've got a shot, and there are ways to reach people, more ways than ever. And in our business, yours and mine, it is about storytelling. It's still the story that's being told, Mike, and you do this so well with video. It's a story that's being told. It's just a different platform that it's told on or in. And so I think, as difficult and horrible as this period has been, it's giving people in creative art, particularly, a chance to innovate a little bit. I've talked to at least a dozen orchestras, including the BSO, who have, punted, if you will, and gone virtual with virtual concerts and virtual programming. I've done dozens of interviews and clips and so forth. And again, it's not the be all and end all. It's not going to get us out of this thing, but it's going to keep, as you said, the name out there. It's going to keep people interested. And that's all we can do right now in some cases.
We're very polarized. Is there a benefit to avoiding it? Is it easier to kind of join in with an echo chamber and work with that target audience? And the reason why I'm asking you, Jordan, is you have always represented to me somebody who is able to take those very polarized opinions and places of perspective and somehow break those down and communicate with people and talk to people, even where there's differences of opinion. Just the way that you're explaining it and the way that you're approaching it is softer and more inviting for both sides, even if those two sides don't have the tendency to agree. Is that something we need to do more of in business? Because I'm starting to see trends towards businesses becoming very defined for a particular target audience ideologically. And they're taking some risk there, because anybody who isn't part of that is now over here, and they can potentially drive that business away. But those who are very politically and social issue oriented, they're feeling like they have a home with these companies that are taking strong positions. I know that's a lot to throw at you, but what's your thought regarding that?
Well, it's a very complex issue, but there are a lot of things you said that I'd like to comment on. First of all, we've always been a people, as a country, that has witnessed polarization at every level. If you look back to the days of the Revolution, certainly leading up to the Civil War, it was Lincoln who said in his second inaugural, with malice toward none, we'll bring people together. I think there is an effort underway every generation to try to calm the fears and calm the outcry. What's different now, and it's pretty obvious, is that everyone has a platform. Everyone has an instant worldwide platform on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. And as a result, the joke is, you would never say things that you say on Twitter to somebody's face. I mean, you wouldn't have the stones to do that. And it's a double-edged sword because it's the great equalizer. It gives people the chance to match wits with the New York Times or Fox News and complain and argue. And I think that's fabulous. And it's the American way. As far as business is concerned, we are currently, and I may say currently, like probably within the last 6 or 8 months, and for very fine reasons, there are people protesting police brutality, inherent racism in certain parts of the country. Absolutely. But we're also dealing with a woke cancel culture that is almost out of control, almost silly when you think about it. So businesses are responding, I think, too quickly and too radically to go out of their way to please one segment or another. And I think your point was well made. It's better off to just lay low and be a good example of a fine business that doesn't discriminate, obviously, that doesn't do the kinds of things. And I think you'll get through it a lot easier. I personally don't talk politics with people I know and like, and I have radar that I think I developed when I was in talk radio in my early days. I can sense almost when people are about to lose their emotional grip because they really believe that they're right and everybody else is wrong. And I'm not condemning these people. They've got a right to feel the way they do. But we just have to take a breath, think about what Lincoln said, and remember, that we're all kind of in this together. At the same time, I think it's healthy, though, that we don't have groupthink all across the board. So businesses, I know in my tiny little business, recording and production business, in yours, you try to lead the best life you can. You do have to be on your defense, though, because there are people who are, I'm not a restaurant owner, but Yelp is a great example. There are people who are going to try to sabotage you with phony criticisms and phony pans when, they have that power. It's not legitimate, it's not right, it's not fair, but it will happen. So you got to be at your best. Be at your best. Don't get involved where you don't think it's important. Well, I should say not important. You can be very much involved on a personal level, but remember, everything you type and print and publish in these times can be used as a weapon, and you just have to be careful. I'm being very practical. I'm very careful. I don't tweet outside of promoting my podcast. I don't do any kind of Facebook work at all because of the tenor of the times. And as a result, I'm fine. I'm so far. But yeah.
It can be used against you, of course, but it's also subject to interpretation, and people interpret it based on sometimes a need to forward thoughts that they might have or opinions that they might have, or try to foster that whole situation where we're divided. People are very quick to jump in and join in when it comes to that.
Well, there's also, and again, I don't think this is unearthing any kind of new development in world news, but there is a segment of society always interested in causing mayhem. I don't mean just physical and violence. I'm talking about just causing trouble, the rabble rousers. They want to, muckrakers, call them what you will. But we're big enough and strong enough as a nation to handle that. And, you look around the world, people always say, America, America. The world is equally at odds with each other. I mean, you go to Britain, you go to France, you go to Asia. It's just, and you add in the fact that we've been stuck in our homes and kept away from working for 4.5, 5 months, then you've got even more of this seething stuff. So I think once the COVID-19 thing comes under control, and there will be a vaccine, hopefully within a year or less, I think you'll see things loosen up. Politics, yeah, that's a big deal. And we've got very, shall we say, vibrant political figures. Let's just put it that way. No matter what you think of them, they're all caustic in their own way. So you just have to, you have to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about this pressure cooker, and this whole political divide. And these are not inspiring things. These are things that I think um, uh, weigh us down as people.
You know, Mike, one of the things I'm doing now that I'm really kind of happy about is a little feature that I've been doing for the last 3 months. When the radio station WBZ asked me to do more, they wanted me to add more features. They said, "What would you like to do?" 60-second nuggets. I said, "There's only one thing I want to do. I want to talk about good news, inspiring story." So it's called The Upside with Jordan. It's basically 60 seconds, a little plug. But I'm finding you have to do some searching because the media doesn't like to. The good news doesn't sell. But I'm finding stories about individuals, groups, um, ranging from the nurse who was on her way to her daughter's wedding in Nebraska, saw a 3-car pileup, stopped in her wedding gown, the mom, saved a woman's life, made it to the wedding 10 minutes early before it started and said, "Sorry, I was a little tied up saving somebody's life on the highway." Two, and I'm a big guy, I'm a big fan of space program. Two, the idea that we have rockets now that are going up to clean up space junk and to take some of the junk out of the space continuum so that our astronauts won't bump into things. Little things like that. I mean, there are a lot of good things happening, many more good things than bad, but they don't get the attention. There's a TV show on Netflix that is really adorable. It's called Magic for Humans. And it's basically this young magician who's really talented, and he goes around and he does a lot of tricks in the streets and stuff, but there's always a message to his show, whether it's how we handle fear or how we handle love or and it's all tied in with his magic and comedy. The point is, human beings, and you and I have been friends for a lot of years, and you know how I think, but human beings need food, water, but we also need that our hearts warmed. We need to feel that there's some good out there. So I think media is missing the boat. I really do. I think there's a lot of opportunity to inspire people to say, wow, if that guy can get out of a wheelchair and volunteer his time, maybe I can. It can be done. It's being done. And I think that's what's going to save a lot of people from despair when they hear good news stories or when they see them.
Interesting, Jordan. I think that some people in the media would say that if you want to reflect the human condition, uh, you do it by focusing on the negative. That seems to be what some people think. But indeed, the human condition has a lot to do with the things that you were just talking about as well. Hopefully, more so.
There are two. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Jordan.
Just going to mention, there are two of my favorite books, 3 books actually, that I'd like to mention really quick. One is a famous one by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, which is so written after he survived the Holocaust and he became a well-respected psychologist. But it's about, understanding life and what makes life worth living, when you survive that. 2 other books that I would say have guided me. One is a book called Care for the Soul by Thomas More, and it's so interesting. You take a look at what really makes us who we are. Money, cars, wealth, position, all good, all nice, but not long lasting. It's that dash between our birth and our death that matters. So that's another one. And the third one is Bless the Space Between Us by Father John O'Donohue. And in this one, the late Father O'Donohue, an Irish priest, provides daily blessings in his own words that just move me to the point where, I say there's a whole lot more than just arguing and bloodletting and complaining and all this. I mean, there really is. So just wanted to put a plug in for those 3 authors and just remind people that it's out there if you look for it.
Wonderful. When it comes to inspiration, Jordan, you got a lot of feet in a lot of different places.
Yes.
But first and foremost, I consider you an artist. As an artist, what inspires you? Or better yet, in the throes of all of these things that are going on right now, where are you finding inspiration?
That's a great question. And now, because we're shut in more, there's an opportunity to go back and watch and listen and experience certain artistic things. I grew up loving theater, and I did a lot of it when I was younger. So I can't go to the stage now, but I certainly enjoy watching theatrical productions. Certain films inspire me, but I think it's the understanding, and I'm not a professional musician by any stretch, but the understanding of how the arts have developed, each individual art form has developed with contributions by people who have come before us. So, for instance, I'm both a classical and a jazz fan, and I understand the, the beautiful intersection of both with someone like Aaron Copland or George Gershwin. Film, I'm a fan of old classic films that paved the way for where we are today. And I guess I'm a nostalgia. Nostalgia inspires me. The idea that I can do what I do in front of one of these. You all know what that is, microphone. But people 50, 60, 100 years ago were doing it for the first time, and that just jazzes me. And I'm doing something that the pioneers did. And you're a fine musician, a great guitarist, and a composer, and everything. And you must think about that too, I imagine. The fact that, hey, I'm doing something that, in your case, Jimi Hendrix did, or Eric Clapton does. In my case, uh, I don't know, Jerry Williams, not really my style, but let me give it a better. Paul Harvey, the great Paul Harvey, or Jess Kane, locally a Boston legend. It's just an honor to be able to fall into that line of artists. So that's what inspires me.
Uh, you're spot on. Looking back for inspiration, I mean, there's a lot of inspiring people and musicians and artists right now doing what they do. You can look back on your career, Jordan, and be inspired by what you did 20 years ago and what you're doing today. But there's something about being inspired by somebody who has done something for so long. We just recently lost, I know was a good friend of yours, Bucky Pizzarelli.
Oh yes, well, I love him and his son.
Yes, yeah. But you look at a career like Bucky has had, going back through the decades. Well, I think it's probably fair to say that guitarists in jazz had a little bit tougher go of it than saxophonists or trumpeters or keyboardists. Those have been more featured throughout time. But understanding those, the limitation of audience or having to work a little bit harder, that's what inspires me to see the way somebody like you have you've taken these moments in history and been able to bring people together, make them laugh. Um, you're I know you don't set out to be a comedian. You're a serious broadcaster, but you've got a great sense of humor, and that comes across. So you've got another thing you can add at one point if you ever wanted to try stand up. You could probably.
I've never done official like open mic stand up, but I've done enough gigs and charity events where it's fallen into place. And the reason I do it, I think, relatively well is because I studied these guys. I watched every Ed Sullivan show when I was a kid, and I idolized these people. I'm actually a fan of comedy history, and oh my God, I just love it. But yeah, I think learning from and appreciating our quote unquote ancestors in our business, or our ancestors in any business in any area, is important. I mean, there's a lot of a rewrite of history, at least the attempt on that right now in some circles. And I think the point that I've learned is everyone has flaws. Everyone has things they're not too proud of. but it's the accomplishments that we should herald. And when it comes to the arts, there are so many examples in broadcasting, and I've had a chance to meet them, many of these older pioneers before they've left us, and what a thrill that is. So it's a connectivity, it's an understanding, it's an appreciation. I always say ball players today, probably with a few exceptions, couldn't name too many of the old players from the 40s and the 50s, maybe not even the 60s or the 70s. But those who can, I think, are better all around people and players because they understand what brought them here. And I think that's the secret.
If you can increase your vocabulary, not just linguistically, but across the board, that's a good thing. And you do that by studying what's come before you, and sometimes by looking very carefully at what's going on right in front of your eyes. I think we have to look back and see, maybe not focus on it to the degree where it stops us in our tracks, but understanding the mistakes that we've made in history so that we don't continue to make them, which is important. So Jordan, for anybody out there who is looking for a career in broadcasting, or wants to get out there and connect with people, or wants to do it from the marketing side of things, leave us with some of that marvelous Jordan-rich wisdom.
Sure. I would say now is the most wonderful opportunistic time to do something creative in media because of what we're doing here on this wonderful program that you've put together, because of the accessibility and the availability. Radio is no longer a tiny population of personalities. It's, if you think about podcasts as really radio on demand, it's universal, it's everywhere. So I urge young people, particularly, start by doing your own podcast. No one's going to tell you you can't do it. And if you have a few bucks for a good, decent microphone. And most important advice I have for anybody wanting to get into the broadcasting world is to know a little bit about a lot of things, to quote Lincoln. Have reference points, because the most fun I've ever had in this whole affair has been to comment on just about everything. And if I don't know anything, I'll look it up. But I mean, for the most part, I love conversing with people about film, food, traffic, old buildings, whatever it might be, politics, geography. I'm not saying be a Yale grad. I'm saying just be aware of the world around you, and you'd be actually doing yourself a big favor, because the world around us, as crazy as it is pretty cool. There's a lot of really cool stuff. So that's it. Just start working on your own. Don't take no for an answer, and lose your Boston accent if you can. That's just a little, throw that in there.
You got it. You got it. Coming from somebody who is an accomplished teacher of voiceover, the art of voiceover. Jordan, thank you. It's been a great pleasure talking with you once again. Best wishes and continued health to you and your family. And please keep in touch. And I look forward to having another conversation in the future.
Let me just say this: you did a beautiful job having me as your guest, and I had you as my guest on more than one occasion. Congratulations, and also on your other projects to try to bring people together. You've always been and continue to be a man after my own heart, somebody who's looking to give and help, and I really appreciate that. So thumbs up. Great job. It was really fun.
Thank you, Jordan. It was a great pleasure. We'll talk soon.